Would you use the voice on the street when you're walking around?
Oh, yeah. And I got a lot of good things that would happen from it. Like if I want information, you know, or let's say I do something wrong, like cross the street when I'm not supposed to, what are you trying to do? Get out of here, you know. And if I said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, they'd say, but if I said,
I'm sorry, I did not mean to, I don't know what to do.
They'd say, oh, all right, it's okay. One time.
Andy Kaufman never regarded himself as a comedian, but rather an entertainer. He didn't tell jokes, that much is true. But that doesn't mean he didn't know how to make people laugh. He certainly possessed comedic timing, charisma, characterization, and the ability to control an audience. It's much more accurate to call his act performance art. Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton never once told a joke. They had other means of making you laugh. And so did Andy. So how did he do this? Let's take a closer look. A world of escapism came to him at an early age. As a kid, he would lock himself in his room and act out his own television shows just to entertain himself. His parents even took him to a psychiatrist to figure out what was wrong with him. Andy himself even admits he felt sad and lonely as a child, so creating his own world and own characters would have been his own form of therapy.
My mother told me when I was 2 years old when my brother was born. He was my younger brother. I was the oldest of three.
Yeah.
And she said, a few years ago, she told me, I didn't remember this, she said the reason they started taking me to psychologists or psychiatrists was because when he was born, I started standing in the living room and I would stare out the window, just stare, and I would be very sad. And they felt that a child shouldn't be sad, so they thought something was wrong.
Were you sad? Do you remember being? No,
yeah.
Do you remember being sad?
Yeah, I can remember. Yeah.
Do you remember what you were sad about? Had anything made you feel sad? An event?
No, just sad.
On top of this, he was declared unfit for the U.S. military draft after failing the psychological part of the test. But acting and performing was all he ever wanted to do. From performing at children's parties as a kid, to studying television production, to performing in nightclubs. Can you imagine him doing anything else? As part of his act, Andy created a foreign man character. An awkward immigrant from a fictional country who spoke with a nervous, high-pitched voice. Audiences were never sure if this guy was for real or not, as Andy knew how to blur the lines of reality. No one had ever done anything like this before. This type of anti-comedy was light years ahead of its time. An often overlooked aspect of this character was how he could also be a thinly veiled parody of lounge comedians, making cliched jokes about their mother-in-law or their wife's cooking.
Talking about the terrible things, my wife, take my wife, please take her. No. Really, I am only fooling. I love my wife very much, but she don't know how to cook. One night, she makes steak and mashed potato, and the night before, she makes spaghetti and meatballs. Her cooking is so bad, it's terrible.
After gaining a reputation on the nightclub circuit, Andy started to make TV appearances, often as foreign man, with audiences not realizing this was actually a fictional character. Here he is on the dating game.
Bachelor number 3. It's the holiday season, and I'm Santa. You're on my lap. Little boy, take it away.
What? Wait a minute. Wait. I don't know what she looked like. Could I see what she looked like?
No, you can't, number 3, no.
Oh, all right.
That's part of the game. You just have to stay there and answer as best you can.
But I don't know who she is.
No, I know. But
I'm
imagine
Santa.
she's beautiful.
Yeah?
I'm Santa. And
Santa
you're
Claus?
Right.
But you don't sound like Santa Claus.
Okay.
Oh, pretend.
Pretend.
Pretend. You're on her lap. Take it from there.
And what do I do?
His big break came in the late 70s, when the ABC network essentially hired him to play foreign man on the sitcom Taxi, and named him as Laka Gravis. Andy was extremely reluctant to do this, as he hated sitcoms. But he was eventually talked into it, and if he was going to do it, as with anything in his art, he was going to do it only how he wanted. As part of his deal to play Laka on Taxi, Andy convinced the producers of the show to also hire Las Vegas singer Tony Clifton to be part of the show. Unbeknown to most people, Tony was actually another alter ego of Andy, who was even sometimes played by Andy's friend Bob Zmuda to keep the ruse going that they were two separate people. Andy also became bored playing Laka, so his character was given a multiple personality disorder, thus giving Andy a chance to play different characters.
I can take one look at you and tell that you've heard every phony line in the book. So one more isn't going to hurt you, right? She's laughing. But seriously now. The first few moments of a relationship set the tone for the whole thing, if you know what I mean. So let's be honest. My name is Vic. I'm into Italian cars, Technic stereos, Australian films, and beautiful ladies. If you're interested, let's talk. If not, it's been fun.
Vic, huh?
No, not Vic, huh? Vic Ferrari.
Vic Ferrari? That isn't your real name, is it?
Why don't you tell me after you see how I perform on a tight corner? Terrible humor, Vic.
But rather than turn his newfound fame into a film career, like his friend and contemporary, Robin Williams, Andy decided to become the biggest troll in the world. He made several crazy talk show appearances, such as this one.
Okay, Andy, why don't you introduce your kids?
Okay. There's George, and there's Herb, and Tony, who's also known as Tino.
George, Herb, and Tony. Nice to meet you guys. Who's you? Herb, nice to meet you.
This is George.
George, nice to see you, sir.
This is Tony.
Tony,
also
how you
known
doing?
as Tino.
Tino, Tony, nice to see you guys. Take some seats there, and well, this is very touching. Andy Kaufman and his family.
Plus, there were infamous episodes of the sketch shows, Fridays, and Saturday Night Live, where Andy would pretend to stop a sketch partway through because he wasn't happy performing it. Sometimes only the producer and a few cast members would be aware of this, and sometimes no one, because he stopped for real.
I can't play. I can't play stoned. I feel really stupid.
You feel stupid. That's just great. That's just great. You feel stupid.
I feel very stupid.
You feel stupid.
I feel
Great.
Oh, let's have some bread.
Yeah. Yeah.
What? I feel stupid.
You feel stupid.
I feel very stupid. No, because where are you going?
Well, I don't know. I think I'm gonna.
Come on, nothing. Hey, this is all in fun. It's all in fun. Come on. All right, all right. It's all in fun. What are you trying to do?
This is all,
It's all in fun. Come on.
where are we now? Cut out. Cut out.
So you cut it out. Well, why do you have to push this in my face? Well, why do you have to push this in my face? I'll put it all in your face.
in the show. That's
Come on. Why? So what do you have
Come on,
to?
just
So what do you have to? What? What? Look, I'm just trying to have fun. Everybody's so uptight around here. Everyone's so uptight around here. I don't understand.
Bobby, call the commercial, man.
What? I don't know. Why do you have to be so uptight? What?
Walk up to me. Come on, man. Hold on.
And it's not as if this didn't get him into trouble. Here he is explaining why he refused to do a sketch based on Elvis Presley.
There was a show, Saturday Night Live, a couple of weeks back where you were doing it, and then I didn't see the show. I saw the tape of what happened. You sort of stopped in the middle. And
Well, that's because they asked me to do the imitation, and I said, well, this is very special to me, and I just want to make sure it's done tastefully. So I did the imitation, but then I was asked to do this sketch where I ask, as Elvis, I ask two girls to wrestle each other with nothing but their panties on. And I said...
This is a reference.
This is a reference to a book by Albert Goldman.
Right.
It's supposed to be an expose of Elvis's personal life. And I didn't want to do the sketch, but, you know, then they pressured me into it, you know.
They being...
Saturday Night Live pressured me into it. You don't do this, we'll ruin you. You'll never work again in this business. We'll ruin your reputation. Spread. I said, no, yeah, really. We'll spread it around that you're hard to work with. You'll never get another job in this business again, you know. So I said, okay, I'll do it. I mean, you know, really. So I did the sketch, but I just couldn't find it within my conscience to continue with it. So I took off my Elvis Presley wig. I looked in the camera and I said, ladies and gentlemen, I just don't do this. This is a reference to that book by Albert Goldman. I don't approve of that book, and I don't approve of what I just did. And now, as a result, I hear that Albert Goldman wants to sue me.
What this proves is that Andy was one of the very few performers who honestly and truly didn't give a damn. He knew he was different, and he embraced this. If he couldn't do what he wanted, what made him happy, then what was the point in performing? And after he had enough of sitcoms and sketch shows, or maybe the other way around, Andy turned to one of his first loves on television: the world of professional wrestling. Andy always loved wrestling. How they could bring the energy out of a crowd and rile them up. And this is something he wanted to recreate, the idea of manipulating an audience and once again blur the lines of reality. He knew he could have a lot of fun playing a chauvinistic heel and proclaimed himself the intergender wrestling champion after challenging only women to matches. He also worked a series of matches with Jerry Lawler, leading to yet another infamous incident.
We're going to pause here for station identification and get the hoses out here.
It wasn't until 10 years later that Jerry revealed that this was all staged, and he and Andy were in fact friends, including the women who Andy had wrestled. So was he a comedian? A performance artist? Or simply the world's biggest troll? Even after being diagnosed with cancer in 1984, legions of fans believe he faked his own death, because that is something only he would do. You can see Andy's influence in other comedians, such as Sacha Baron Cohen, Nathan Fielder, and Jim Carrey. And Jerry Seinfeld even said the only other guy who could pull off Kramer was Andy Kaufman.
But now that you mention it, Andy could have pulled off Kramer.
He could have.
He's the only name I've ever heard that, now that you mention it, the only other guy who could have pulled off Kramer.
Andy Kaufman wasn't in it for fame and money. He just did what he wanted to do, no matter the audience. He was light years ahead of his time, even if his time was tragically cut short.
Are you going to pay some price, or have you felt that you're paying a price, not being the typical company guy, the organization guy, the doing what everybody else does, the getting into the lifestyle that everybody else has?
If I was like that, I don't think I could do what I do. If I was just regular normal, I wouldn't be able to do the things that I do when I'm performing.